Today we're talking about the Waves Abbey Road 124 compressor, and in this video I'm going to be doing a full review and tutorial on it. And make sure you guys stick around to the very end, and I'll let you guys know my final thoughts on it, and then also what instrument that it sounds the best on. So we'll get to that all right after this introduction. Welcome everybody, I'm Dan Spencer, and I am the Audio Sorcerer. So this is the channel where I teach you how to perfect your audio recording, mixing, and mastering skills. So before we get to the video, make sure you guys smash that like button, please subscribe and hit that notification bell to know when I have new videos coming out. So without further ado, today we are talking about the new Waves Abbey Road RS124 compressor. So this compressor is modeled after the one that they have at Abbey Road Studios, and basically the story is that this company, Altec, as you can see right here, it's in the middle of the VU meter here, they gave these compressors to Abbey Road Studios back in the 60s, and the engineers didn't really like how they sound, so they ended up replacing almost all the components in them. I think the only thing that they really left was this VU meter here, and hence why it has the name Altec on it. So that's a little bit of the story behind it. So this compressor was used for, I would say, mix down. So when they were bouncing down from like a 4-track recorder down to another 4-track recorder, when they're bouncing down those 4 tracks to one, they would run it through this in some situations. So it could be used on individual tracks, but in me playing with it today, I think it sounds the best on submixes or on buses. So that's how we're actually going to kind of use it in this tutorial. So this compressor here has a very smooth sound to it. However, you can get a little bit of punch out of it. It definitely has some grittiness to it, and you can push it pretty hard without over compressing it. So it has some nice character to it. I'm really digging it with my time of playing with it today. So what we're going to do is we are going to test this out on a drum mix, on a bass guitar, and also on a vocal mix. You can hear it in those 3 different situations. So before we get to the listening part of this tutorial/review, let's actually go over all the parameters in this plugin so you know what they all do. So let's begin with that. Alright, so first off, the reason you see 2 compressors here is because I have this on a stereo track. So the top one is left and the bottom one is right. If this is on a mono track, you would only have one of these. So starting at the left, this auto hold button here, what this does is actually smooths out the transients of the sound, because this compressor has been known to have some of the transients kind of pop through really hard, and this will help compensate for that. So just keep that in mind. If you ever run into the issue, use this button. Below this button here opens and closes this advanced section down here. Just a toggle button. Next to that is our recovery, and that is just your release. And you have 6 different settings here, starting with 1 being the fastest and 6 being the slowest. Obviously your input control controls the input level of the sound into the compressor. Then you have your VU meter here, and you can set it for the in level, gain reduction, or out level. Then you have your output attenuator. So as you are getting gain reduction, you want to make up with it here. Over here is the super fuse button. And this is something that's not originally on this compressor according to the manual. They just added it in for just some extra stuff to play with, some extra, I guess you can add some extra character with it, and it actually does. If you push it in, if you enable it, it basically makes the attack and release times be exactly the same, and it does mention you have to be kind of careful because you can overcompress the sound with it. So just keep that in mind. Below that, your unit type, you have studio and cutter. So the studio version here has a faster attack time, and the cutter has a slower attack time. That's probably the best way to just think about this here. If you want more punch, you're going to want to use the cutter setting, and if you want to smooth out a sound, you'll want to use the studio setting. So those are the main controls in the compressor section here. Let's go down to the advanced section. So you have an option for sidechain high pass. It goes from 20 Hertz up to 200 Hertz. And then you have a mix knob, which is great. All the stuff today has mix knobs, it seems, so we can do some bit of a parallel effect. So you have that option here. And you can link or unlink those knobs with this little switch right here. And right here is your monitor section, and this is pretty self-explanatory. So that is all the parameters in here. If you guys, want to kind of mess around with it on your own first, you can always go up to the load section here and you have all these presets in here. So you can kind of see where, this compressor is geared towards by looking in presets. So the Abbey Road one you think would be kind of the default set of presets. So you have drums and vocals and then miscellaneous. So that's saying, hey, this is probably going to be good on drums and vocals. Hence why those are two of the instruments we're testing in this. But many people will tell you this compressor sounds great on bass, and it does actually. So I want to make sure I let you guys hear that. So that being said, now that we've gone over to plugin, let's do our first listening experiment here, and we will dial in the sound with this compressor on a drum mix. All right, so I'm digging that. And I ended up using the Super Fuse button here because I felt like it made the drums a little bit more punchy and compact. It definitely didn't make them bigger, but it made them exactly what I needed for this particular drum track. And I'm really loving that sound. That's kind of a sound you hear on modern drums today, some of the pop songs with these really tight, compact drums. And this will help you achieve it here with this button using this compressor. So I ended up leaving it on the studio setting because I wanted a faster attack time for a more controlled sound. And we were only getting about -3 dBs of gain reduction. I don't like to smash my drum bus, so -3 dBs is about all I really want off of it. And that was really it. And that's all it took to create that sound. So I'm really digging that. So let's do one last listen for the drums, and I will start with this plugin bypass, and then I'll bring it back in. All right, so those are our drums. So now let's move on to the bass. All right, that actually sounds pretty dope. We got a lot of life out of the bass with these settings here. Now, I put it on the cutter setting because I wanted to get quite a bit of that transient through. And then I also put the super fuse on, what kind of contradicts the cutter setting because the super fuse thing can kind of overcompress it. So we have this real level bass sound with the transients popping through. And that's kind of that popping sound I talked about earlier that you can kind of smooth out with the auto hold. But I think this bass is actually what makes this song move. So I kind of want to have all of those transients popping through. So I'm really digging that. And we were smashing it pretty good. I think we were hitting somewhere in between -10 to -15 dBs of gain reduction. So I'm loving it. So as we did with the drums, let's do a listen with it bypassed and then I'll bring it in. All right, so here we go. All right, I absolutely love that. So we'll stop there with bass. Let's move on to our last instrument, which are the vocals.
Your imagination makes me look like the fool. Your imagination makes people think they know me too, but I never thought they'll take your word. You should have thought before you spoke. You're just a shadow to the joke. Your imagination makes me look like the fool. Your imagination makes people think they know me too, but I never thought they'll take your word. You should have thought before you spoke. You're just a shadow to the joke. Your imagination makes me look like the fool. Your imagination makes people think they know me too.
All right, cool. So what I did was I put this on the vocal bus, and I feel like the individual compression on each of the vocal tracks was enough to make them sound good. So what we're using this for is just to get a little bit more character out of them as a whole. And we're only getting about -2 to -3 dBs of gain reduction. That's all I really wanted for this compressor. And I ended up using the cutter setting because I wanted some of the transients to get through. Again, this is a slower attack time here on the cutter compared to the studio. And then I enabled the superfuse button again. And as you guys can see, there's a trend going on right now. I actually really like this superfuse button here. And it's funny because it's not on the original compressor. So with these two settings here, I did feel like a few words kind of popped through a little harshly. So I did enable the auto hold button and I feel like that took care of that. So yeah, I really like how this sounds. So as we did before, let's do a listen with it bypassed and then I'll bring it back in. So here we go.
Your imagination makes me look like the fool. Your imagination makes people think they know me too, but I never thought they'll take your word. You should have thought before you spoke. You're just a shadow to the joke.
All right, so that was our little vocal comparison there. And as you can see, we use this a little bit more subtly on the vocals compared to the bass and drums. And I felt like the vocals already sounded really good. This just gave them just a smidge extra more grit and kind of maybe gave them that extra 5%. And sometimes 5% is all you need in your song to take it to the next level. So that is my review / tutorial on the Abbey Roads RS124 compressor. And just to recap, I would say that I really like this compressor, but I don't think I like it the way it's supposed to be used. And what I mean by that is that I feel like I only really like it when I have the superfuse button enabled. I really like what that does to the sound. So again, that doesn't exist on the real 124 compressor. So I guess you can say I'm not using it how it was meant to be used. But they gave us that button, so why not use it? And I just feel like I have other compressors that are better than this when it comes to specific instruments. Like I would never use this on individual vocals. I love my LA2A, I love my 1176. This would never replace those. So I also would never use this on a overall mix bus because I love my CLA mixdown. So this is not going to replace that. So I think personally that the only place I'm going to use this compressor at, and don't get me wrong, it still sounds amazing, is just on the bass guitar. I really like what it did to the bass. I really think that the options that it has in here to create that really punchy sounding bass while smoothing it out, it gives you the best of both worlds, is the reason I think that it's one of the best compressors I've heard for bass, at least when it comes to plugins. So yeah, so I mean, that's my opinion. I'd love to know what you guys think. Definitely leave a comment in the comment section below and let me know. And if you guys end up liking this video, give it a thumbs up. Please subscribe and hit that notification bell to know when I have new videos coming out. So with that being said, until the next video, I'll see you guys later and peace out.